Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying Yirmiyahu 8a, that's the prophet Jeremiah, the beginning of chapter 8. And as I explained in the last podcast, I'm actually going to be starting from verse 32 in chapter 7. So the last three verses in chapter 7 are really the beginning of chapter 8. So we'll start with 7:32. We just read of the harsh rebuke of Yirmiyahu, of the prophet and God, speaking the words of God to the people, telling them that the building, the bricks and mortar, so to speak, of the temple and the worship and the sacrifices going on in there is not going to save them if they don't become better people. They have to end their oppression, they have to end the injustice, they have to end the corruption. Then and only then will they be saved. But if they continue to persist in their corrupt ways and pretend to think that by worshiping in the temple and bringing sacrifices they're going to be saved, that it's not going to work. When people have that kind of philosophy that it's sacrifice and ritual, which somehow gets God's favor and helps them be saved from disaster, it's not a far jump from them to go from worshiping God to worshiping an idol, because that's what an idol worship is. It's a life that requires no morality in order to get God's favor. In other words, in monotheism, in order for us to have a good relationship with God and to live well, we need to be good, as opposed to when one worships an idol, it's the whatever the service for that idol is, whatever sacrifices it is that you bring to that idol, and so on, that gains favor. So it's a quick jump. If you think of the temple in that way, then that's why in the end of what we just studied in chapter 7, Yirmiyahu jumped from criticizing the people for using the temple as if, God forbid, as if it was an idol. And then they would also go to the valley of Ben Hinnom and actually bring sacrifices to idols, and that's what the valley of Tophet was. Was the name of the idol they would worship and bring sacrifices to. And on the worst level, and the most horrific thing to imagine, was they also practiced human sacrifice, and that's as bad as it can possibly get, as one can imagine. And we just finished saying the words. God said, this is something that I could never even possibly have imagined, so to speak, as if God had an imagination. God is saying, this is so awful, so horrible, and so terrible. So we begin today with verse 32, where because of this horror, God says as follows: Lochein, therefore, hinei yamim boim, there will be days coming, no'om Adonai, says God, v'lo ye'omer od hatofet v'gei ben Hinnom. No longer will people say, there's this valley of Ben Hinnom, this valley that's just beneath Jerusalem, or this valley of Tophet, which was the idol that they were worshiping. Rather, they're going to change its name, Kim Gei HaHarega. They're going to call it the Valley of Murder. Now, this is a reference here to the murder that's going to take place during the destruction of Jerusalem, the murder that takes place on the hands of the invaders, and the kavru betofet mein makom, the people, the dead of the invasion, the victims of the invasion, will be so many that there won't be place to bury them in that valley. There won't be enough place. And this verse 33, and the carcasses of the people will be as food, l'of hashemayim, for the birds, the levamasars, and the animals, the scavengers, the vultures, the hyenas. They're all going to come and eat the bodies of the dead. Ve'ein macharid, and there won't be any people around to chase them away, because the people will be destroyed. V'hishbati, and I will destroy. This is verse 34. Me'orei Yehuda, from the cities of Judah, mechutzos Yerushalayim, and from the streets of Jerusalem I will destroy kol sason v'kol simcha, all of the sounds of rejoicing and happiness, kol chason v'kol kala, the sounds of brides and grooms. All of that will be gone. It will be just ki lecharba ti'aretz. It will just be destroyed, and it will just be ruined. Now, chapter 8, verse 1, Ba'itahi, and this time, No'om Adonai, this is what God says, Yotziu, the enemies will in order to I try to, in order to, just the viciousness with which they're going to attack. They're going to destroy the people themselves, but they're even going to desecrate the graves, as Atmot Machayehuda, the bones of the kings of Judah. So they'll invade the tombs and take out the bodies or the bones of the kings, Atmot Sarav, and the bones of all of the high-ranking officers that have fancy tombs, Atmot Zakonim, and the bones of the priests, Atmot Hanavim, and even the bones of the prophets. Presumably this is referring to the false prophets that led the people astray. Atmos Yoshua Yerushalayim, and they'll even uproot just the graves of the common people of Jerusalem, Mikavram, from their graves. This is how much anger and vengeance the enemy will place upon the people when they attack. And they will lay them out before the sun and the moon, and before the stars. Asher. Why? Because these are the sun and the moon and the stars that the people worshipped as idols. Asher ahivum, those heavenly bodies that the people loved them. Vasher avadum, and they worshipped them. Vasher holchlacharayim, and they followed in their path. Vasher dirashum, and they searched out the paths of the stars in the sky to make decisions about their lives, rather than look to God alone. Vasher shtachvulam, and they bowed to them. Lo ye'asvu v'lo yikaveru. The bones will be laid out, and no one will be around to gather them. No one will be around to rebury them in a respectful way. L'domen al pnei adamayu. They will be like garbage strewn across the face of the earth. And the destruction will be so awful. Verse 3, v'nivchar mavis mechayim. People would rather be dead than alive. L'chol ha'she'eres hanasham, for all those remainders. And this is a slight bit of consolation here. There will be survivors, and there will be left. It will not be complete destruction, which we've had numerous times so far in Jeremiah. Min ha'mishpacha ha'ra'azos, from this evil family. This evil family could be referring to all the people of Israel. It could also be referring specifically to the family of the kings that had unfortunately not lived up to their mission, which was to lead the people in the right direction. Whoever is left of them would rather be dead than alive. In all of those places where these remnants, the people that survive, are now being exiled to and banished to and sent to, they're going to be suffering so much from the enslavement and the suffering that they would rather choose death. So says God, the Lord of hosts. Verse 4. And here it again emphasizes, in these next few verses, we're going to discuss the issue of people not being willing to change their ways. In other words, it's not the fact that they made the mistake that's the biggest problem. It's the fact that they made the mistake and they were taught the right way. They were even punished for the mistake, but they still didn't learn their lesson. They continued to persist. They refused to apologize, refused to say they're sorry, refused to say they made a mistake, refused to say that there was something wrong. And that's what these next few verses are saying. Verse 4, V'yamarta aleim, and you will say to them, this is still God speaking to the prophet, saying you should say to the people, Ko amar Adonai, so says God, Hayiplu v'lo yakumu, im yashuv v'lo yashuv. When men fall, don't they get up? You fell on the ground, you hurt yourself, then you get up. Im yashuv. If they turn the wrong direction and get on the wrong road, then they turn around and go back on the right road. Isn't that what people do? So then verse 5, Madua shova v'ha'am hazeh. Why is this people, this nation, so rebellious? Yerushalayim meshuva nitzachas. It is a complete rebellion, meaning a rebellion that's constant. They don't turn around. They don't recognize their mistake. It's almost like there was a communist revolution and communism failed. At least the people realized after a while that it failed, and they changed. It took a while, it took many years, generations, but at some point the people said, this isn't working, so that they turned around. But these people went on a bad path, and no matter how much it failed, they still don't turn around, they don't change their ways. Hachaziku bitarmit. They cling to their false ways. They cling to it. They don't change. They refuse to change. The word tarmit is like is falsehood or deceit. They just stick to it. Me'anu lashuv. They refuse to return. They refuse to change. They refuse to change. Hikshavti vo'eshma. I have listened and I have heard. In other words, I went. The prophet is saying, the prophet has been tasked by God several times. Go listen, go see, go talk to the people, see what you find. So he's saying, well, I did. Locheini daberu. They don't speak honestly. They don't speak honestly to each other. That it's all a lie. Ein ish nichom al ra'aso. There isn't a single person who regrets the evil that he did. Think about people who nowadays it's almost it's almost considered a virtue to never apologize, to double down. This is what the entire society was, and unfortunately we see this today. It's just when somebody does something wrong, instead of recognizing the mistake, taking responsibility and fixing it, they double down on the evil. Ein ish nicham al ra'aso lemar me'al sisi. No one is regretting the bad that he did to say, well, what have I done? But rather kulo shav b'mrutzasam. They persist in they're running, they're rushing forward. I remember sometimes you see when you're going down a steep hill on a highway, they have a runaway truck ramp that goes steep upward on the side of the road for a truck that's going down the hill so fast that it can't stop. The brakes just can't stop the truck. It's too heavy, too much power. In those days, they used that would be an image we think this day. They're just running in the direction so fast that they can't stop. Kisus shotef b'milchama, like a horse that is rushing, charging into war. The horse can't just stop. It just charges and keeps going. Gam chasida vashamayim, even the chasida is a type of bird, usually translated as a stork in the heavens. Yad'a mo'adea, she knows her seasons. She knows when to go north. She knows when to go south. She knows when to lay eggs. She knows when to mate. She knows when to eat. She knows when to hunt. The birds understand nature. Vitor, persist, agur. These are other types of birds. Tar is usually translated as a turtle dove, a sis, and an agur, a little bit less clear, but I see them translated as a swift and a crane. They shamru et eit bo'ana. They know the times to come. These are migratory birds. They know when they come, when they go here, when they go there. However, v'ami lo yadu et mishpat Adonai. My nation does not know the judgment of God. Now, this is important because what this is really saying is the idea that keeping the laws and rules of God is really a law and rule of nature. The fact that a corrupt and unjust and oppressive society will not last and will eventually collapse in destruction and be destroyed by enemies is a fact of nature. It's something that exists because it's just true. It's the way the world works. Just like the seasons and the migration patterns of birds are a fact of nature. The fact that the bird needs to be here in the winter and there in the summer is what the bird needs to survive, the society of those birds. It's the same thing by human beings. A society that doesn't keep basic morality is not a society that can last. Therefore, how could it be, and this is verse 8, that you can say, that you people can say, we are smart, we're educated, we have the Torah of God. Because why are they saying that? Because we're worshiping in the temple, we're bringing sacrifices, we're doing all the rituals, we're doing all the mitzvot the way it says, we're shaking we're waving the 4 species on Sukkot. We're praying 3 times a day. But rather, achein, in truth, hinei la sheker asa. What you're doing is all false. 8 sheker sofrim. The pen of the writers is a pen of falsehood. The writing articles telling you about how to do this commandment properly. What are the laws for this commandment? How do you do in the temple? These are lies, because these are not what God wants. Hovishu chachamim. Those wise people that speak this way are going to be embarrassed and ashamed. Chatu v'yilachedu. They will be frightened, or they will be dismayed.